She's the EU Commissioner for Financial Stability, but of course a former journalist in Ireland, and a member of the European Parliament from Ireland. You should be there.
Well, I should be, but duty calls, and I'm here. And what's really good to say is that in 2016, when President Biden was Vice President, I welcomed him to Louth, which is my home county. So I'm from the same county as his ancestors, and I'm keeping an eye on what's happening in Dublin. I think the rain has stopped, which is really good. And it looks like it's been a very impressive visit. And I would love to be there, but there's lots happening here that I need to keep an eye on.
It must be big to keep you here. Yeah. The reality is the financial stability. I'm keeping an eye on the pictures here of the President, just so that when we see him, because we can talk.
Can I glance?
Yeah, go on, have a glance. Yeah, you have a glance at the picture. Go on. You can see that's the President. You'll be getting out of that car. Tell me, look, financial stability. The whole banking net system. Everybody's worried it's not about to collapse, but that there's a weakness that is still yet to be exposed.
Well, what's interesting is after COVID, I think we were all a bit concerned about the financial system and the health of our banking system. And the truth is, it's been very resilient. And I think from a European Union perspective, the work we did after the crash really enhanced the banks so that their capital requirements, their liquidity issues are strong. That's not to say that we're complacent. What happened in the US certainly, had ripples in Europe, and we were watching very closely.
Credit Suisse, though, the way the Swiss dealt with it, not the way that the
Not the way we would deal with it, absolutely. And I think that it was really important that the ECB clarified that. But the future is what we need to look to. And you're right in saying that we need to be mindful of everything around the financial system and watch very closely to make sure that we don't have problems. So I'm looking forward to the report about SVB so that we see exactly what happened. As I speak to people here, there is a sense in which there is calm.
Do you also see a tightening of credit? We were just talking to the president of the EIB, who basically says, yes, it's definitely happening, but we can't necessarily quantify the extent.
Okay, well, if interest rates rise and there are issues there, people are reluctant to borrow as much. Where they need to borrow and we need to invest is in the green transition towards a more sustainable economy, a more digital economy, and one that works and serves both businesses and
But if there's a credit crunch because of SVB...
Well, there isn't a credit... No, we have to be very careful about words.
Right.
There's not a credit crunch. I think what happened with
tightening
SVB,
of credit.
There's tightening of credit, but let's look back and the point about resilience. Our banking system in Europe went through the horrors of a big crash. We learned hard lessons, and we've a stronger, more resilient banking system today. But it will only stay strong and resilient if we watch for the unexpected. So all of our regulators, our supervisors, my role is to make sure that that system serves the economy. So it's not to say that what happened in the US stayed in the US. You saw that there were concerns both in the European Parliament, but it will also allow us to make sure that Basel III is implemented effectively and fully, that we prepare our banking system for the future based on the experiences of the past, and that we have this very resilient banking system.
The moment you mentioned Basel III, we must go back and look at the pictures to see what's happening in Dublin this evening. See if actually the President is on his visit.
What I have to say, when I did it, when he was Vice President, his genuine grow, as we would say, love of Ireland is very strong. And he was with his family at the time. And I think the fact that he's spending time in Ireland, that he went to Belfast first and rightly recognising the peace process and giving commitments to Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland and to the UK about US commitment to that process, I think that's really, really important.
But Nick Robertson was just saying that, and you may not have seen what the President said with the Taoiseach, there might be an element of to the British and to Rishi Sunak, come on, get your act together, move forward. You need to do...
Look, we're all in this together. I mean, peace is precious, because I've lived through a time when we didn't have peace on the island of Ireland. And though there are difficulties now, nobody wants to go back to the horrors of that time. But what we do have to try and see happen is that the Assembly functions again, that people get back to the table and work towards helping the economy and society. We've resolved the protocol issues, which were a really difficult point around Brexit.
Do you think the Windsor framework's going to do it?
Well, the Windsor framework will do it, because the people of Northern Ireland and businesses in Northern Ireland want to move on. And I'm hoping that politics will also move on. From a European Union perspective, 2016, remember, is when the vote happened. This is 2023. The world has changed.
Right.
We're working hand in glove with the UK on sanctions, with the US against what Russia is doing in Ukraine. So there are lots of big issues, but the peace process in Northern Ireland matters to all of us, and we value the US interest, and we of course know that the European Union is also fully behind peace in Northern Ireland, as we all should be.
Do you see, with your Irish roots, do you see the US still having a major role in this? It's a very strange role, isn't it, in a sense?
It's not strange at all, because I think that if you remember the past, you will actually realise how the present is so precious, because a generation of young people have not grown up with murder and violence. That's not to say that the peace is fragile. And we saw a recent instance where young people who were not even born at the time of the peace process were throwing stones and grenades and whatever. So I say with real sincerity that all of us have a duty of care around the peace process. And President Biden is absolutely committed. I mean, you can see him there with the Taoiseach, my party leader, Leo Varadkar. I think the visit has been incredible. He was in Dundalk, which is a town close to where I live myself. I was a little bit jealous that I wasn't there. He was in Carlingford, which is a beautiful part of County Louth. And he will go west, where he also has very deep family connections. And, you know, some people are cynical about this. You know, they say, oh, this is just, you know, look, if you like, drawing on Irish roots. My experience is with the then Vice President Biden, it's absolutely sincere. And I think Irish people are delighted that the strong bonds between Ireland and the US, which were based on horrors of the past, where Irish people had to leave because of tragedies in Ireland. And it's nice that they're having a banquet. I hope they remember me there a little this evening, but I doubt it somehow.
Good to see you.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah,